Welcome to our deep dive into the world of Harry Potter. And I have to say, revisiting these is pure joy.
Yeah.
Today, we're going beyond the spells and potions
Okay.
to uncover how J.K. Rowling uses details to make this world feel so real.
Right.
You can practically smell the treacle tart in the Hogwarts dining hall.
It's true. It's more than just describing things, though.
Yeah.
It's about carefully choosing details
Okay.
that awaken the senses and ground the fantastical in the familiar.
Right.
It's that subtle weaving of reality and magic
I see.
that truly draws readers in.
Okay, so let's start with those senses.
Okay.
One thing that always strikes me is how Rowling uses descriptive language to create a feeling.
Yeah.
Take Harry's 13th birthday in Prisoner of Azkaban.
Okay.
He's stuck with the Dursleys, utterly miserable.
Right.
We all know the basic situation.
Yeah.
But it's the details that get under your skin.
Exact.
You know?
We're given this almost claustrophobic picture of his tiny room, Hedwig's empty cage,
Oh, yeah.
a single shaft of moonlight, the cool air on his face.
Right.
It's not just that he's unhappy.
Right.
We feel that trapped, suffocating feeling with him.
And that makes the arrival of his Hogwarts letters bursting in, defying the Dursleys' attempts to control him,
Yeah.
even more liberating.
Yeah.
It's like a physical manifestation of magic breaking through.
That's such a good point.
Yeah.
That contrast wouldn't be nearly as powerful without first establishing that sense of confinement.
Right.
And it's not just about atmosphere.
Okay.
Details also make magical objects feel real.
Okay.
The firebolt broom, for example.
Right.
Do you remember what stood out to you in that description?
Oh, definitely the speed.
Okay.
Rowling mentions it can go from 0 to 150 miles per hour in 10 seconds.
Wow.
That detail alone, grounded in a unit of measurement we understand,
Yeah.
suddenly makes this magical object feel fast, like something you could almost ride.
And she subtly reinforces that desirability by telling us the Irish international Quidditch team just ordered 7.
Oh, wow.
Suddenly, it's not just a kid's toy.
Okay.
It's a professional athlete's tool.
Yeah.
It elevates the broom to a whole new level.
Exactly. Speaking of grounding the fantastical,
Yes.
let's talk about location.
Okay.
Rowling blends magic into familiar places, particularly London.
Right.
It's almost like she's saying magic is hiding in plain sight, if you know where to look.
Think about Diagon Alley.
Note.
You got this bustling, ordinary London, and then tucked away behind a pub, you have this secret, magical street. It's like a world within a world.
Yeah.
And that first glimpse Harry gets, it's just pure sensory overload, right?
Absolutely. The sights, the sounds, the smells.
Yeah.
It's like Rowling took every stereotype of a magical marketplace and cranked it up to 11.
Right.
But you're right. It's all framed within the context of a city we recognize.
And that's what makes it so clever. The Ministry of Magic, hidden in the heart of London, does the same thing in the Bron Place, too.
Okay.
Is a secret headquarters disguised as a normal house.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder, what if magic really is hidden around us?
It makes those ordinary places feel suddenly full of possibility. Like you said, it's that layer of familiarity that makes the unbelievable feel almost believable.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like finding Narnia in the back of a wardrobe.
Right.
And speaking of unique creations, we have to talk about Quidditch.
Okay.
It's not just a game.
Right.
It's a fully realized sport, complete with intricate rules, passionate fans, and of course those crazy flying broomsticks.
Of course.
What detail about Quidditch always sticks with you?
The golden snitch.
Okay.
This tiny, almost impossible to catch ball completely dictates the outcome of the game. It creates this incredible tension and unpredictability.
It's brilliant.
Yeah.
It's a detail that adds a whole other layer of strategy and skill to the game. The Seeker isn't just chasing the snitch. They're trying to outwit and outmaneuver their opponent while the rest of the game is going on around them.
Right.
And the snitch itself is described as being enchanted, almost alive.
Yeah.
This detail makes it feel more like a mythical creature than just a ball.
Right.
It elevates Quidditch beyond a simple sport.
You're right. It becomes this almost symbolic quest.
Yeah.
And that's something Rowling does consistently. She takes these magical concepts, places, objects, even games, and imbues them with a sense of history, a sense of depth, through these very specific, carefully chosen details.
Exactly.
So it's not just about making things up.
Right.
It's about making them feel like they've always existed.
Yeah.
Like they have a story of their own.
And that's what truly makes readers feel like they can step right into that world. It's not just seeing it,
Right.
it's feeling it, almost believing in it, because of the richness of those details.
And speaking of feeling it, let's talk about how Rowling uses details to bring her characters to life.
Okay.
It's not just about what they look like. It's about those little quirks and mannerisms that make them feel real.
Right.
Like Hagrid, for example.
Okay.
We all know he's this giant, half-giant.
Yeah.
But it's the details that make him so lovable, right?
Absolutely. His booming voice,
Yeah.
his West Country accent, that constant bless him when talking about Muggles.
It's almost like he's both larger than life and incredibly endearing at the same time.
Right.
I've always wondered if that speech pattern is a detail that works for everyone, though
Yeah.
it's charming.
Yeah.
But does it also subtly position Muggles as a bit simple?
Oh.
Like they need things explained to them in a simplified way.
That's a really interesting point.
Yeah.
It's those kinds of details that can spark different interpretations.
Right.
Rowling doesn't shy away from potentially problematic elements.
Right.
And it's up to the reader to consider the implications.
And that's what makes these books so ripe for discussion.
Yeah.
But back to character details.
Okay.
On the complete opposite end of the spectrum, from Hagrid, you have Snape.
Right.
What details about him stand out to you?
Oh, where do I even begin?
I don't know. You tell me.
His perpetually greasy hair,
Wow.
the billowing black robes,
Yeah.
that sneer that could curdle milk.
Oh, wow.
He's described almost as a caricature of a stereotypical potions master.
Right.
Yet there's this underlying complexity to him that makes him fascinating.
And those details you mentioned, they're almost visual cues, right? Like,
Right.
even if you just pictured him, you instantly get a sense of his character.
Exactly. And that's what Rowling does so well.
Yeah.
She uses details not just to tell us about her characters,
Right.
but to show us who they are, what they represent, and how they fit into this world.
Okay, so we've talked about descriptive writing, familiar locations, unique inventions, and character details.
Yep.
It feels like all these elements are starting to come together to build this immersive world.
It's like she's creating a tapestry.
Okay.
With each detail, a carefully chosen thread that contributes to the overall picture.
Right.
And it's not just about what she includes, it's also about what she leaves out. There's a certain amount of ambiguity that allows readers to fill in the gaps with their own imaginations.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
It's like those blank spaces on a map that just make you want to explore further.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that sense of discovery is a huge part of what makes the wizarding world so compelling.
Absolutely.
It's like she's giving us the framework and inviting us to build our own version of the wizarding world within it. And another way she achieves that immersion is through the way she uses language to create atmosphere. Think about Hogwarts, for example.
Oh, Hogwarts. I swear, I can practically hear the crackling fires and smell the roast beef wafting from the kitchens just thinking about it.
Exactly. It's described in these warm, inviting tones with details like moving staircases and talking portraits that, while fantastical, somehow feel cozy and familiar. Then you have the Dursleys' house, which is all about sterility and order.
It's almost like their house is a reflection of their personalities. Everything is perfectly in its place. There's no room for individuality or imagination, a stark contrast to the vibrancy of Hogwarts.
And those contrasting descriptions wouldn't be nearly as effective without the nuances of language. It's like she's using words to create a sensory experience, not just a visual one.
And that attention to language extends to the characters' voices take. Hagrid, we've already discussed his speech patterns, but it's worth noting how those quirks contribute to his overall persona.
Yes, he's got this wonderful rough-around-the-edges way of speaking, full of malapropisms and colloquialisms. It makes him feel authentic and adds a layer of humor to his interactions.
And it makes his love for magical creatures, even the dangerous ones, that much more believable. He's not afraid to get his hands dirty, so to speak.
It completely contrasts with Dumbledore, whose speech is always so measured and eloquent, often, with a hint of mischief hidden beneath the surface.
And then you have Snape, who seems to relish every opportunity to be sarcastic and cutting, especially when dealing with students. It's those nuances in dialogue that truly bring these characters to life.
They're not just spouting lines, they're engaging in conversations that feel real and reflect their individual personalities. It's like we're eavesdropping on their lives, not just reading about them.
And beyond language, Rowling uses details to create a sense of history. It's not just a backdrop for Harry's adventures. It's a world with a rich and complex past full of legends, myths, and long-forgotten events. The founders of Hogwarts, for example, aren't just names. They're figures whose legacies continue to shape the present.
Exactly. And then you have all these historical events that are referenced throughout the books, the Goblin Wars, the Giant Wars, creating this feeling that there's so much more to this world than what we see in Harry's immediate surroundings.
It's like she's built this entire iceberg of history, and we're only seeing the tip of it.
And that depth makes the world feel lived in, like it has a weight and significance beyond the scope of Harry's story.
It's like those seemingly insignificant details are breadcrumbs leading us deeper and deeper into this incredibly complex and fascinating world. Okay, I need to pause for a moment and talk about the food. The descriptions of those Hogwarts feasts are enough to make me want to apparate straight into the Great Hall.
Oh, absolutely. Mountains of roast beef platters piled high with mashed potatoes and gravy stacks of treacle tart, those giant pumpkins filled with pumpkin juice. It's pure culinary magic.
It's not just the sheer abundance of food, though. It's the way Rowling describes it. Remember the Christmas feast in Sorcerer's Stone? She talks about the flaming Christmas puddings, the golden rose turkeys, the crystal goblets filled with pumpkin juice. It's like a sensory symphony.
You can practically taste those roast potatoes and feel the warmth of the fire in the Great Hall.
And then you have those smaller food moments that are just as evocative, like Ron's love for chocolate frogs and Bertie Bott's every flavor beans.
Those are such fun details. They add a touch of whimsy and make the characters feel even more relatable.
It's like, sure, they're battling dark wizards and saving the world, but they're also teenagers who crave sweets and enjoy a good feast.
And those seemingly insignificant moments add a layer of normalcy and realism to a world that could easily become overwhelming with its fantastical elements.
Speaking of those fantastical elements, I'm always amazed by Rowling's use of foreshadowing. She's a master at planting subtle clues and hints that often go unnoticed on the first read.
It's like she's playing a long game, and it's incredibly satisfying when you go back and realize those seemingly innocuous details were actually signposts pointing to future events.
Like Harry's first encounter with Professor Quirrell in Sorcerer's Stone. He describes feeling a sudden chill and noticing Quirrell's stutter.
And at the time, it's easy to dismiss those details as just Quirrell being a nervous, awkward teacher, but knowing what we know now, it takes on a whole new meaning.
Exactly. It's like Rowling is giving us these little glimpses into the future, but we're not equipped to understand them until we have the full context.
And that layering of meaning adds so much depth and complexity to the story. It makes you want to keep rereading to see what other clues you might have missed.
It's like she's constantly challenging us to pay closer attention, to look beyond the surface and delve deeper into the mysteries of the wizarding world.
And speaking of mysteries, we have to talk about the magical creatures. They're not just fantastical additions. They're integral to the world's ecosystem, each with their own unique abilities and social structures. What creature always stood out to you?
I've always been fascinated by the house elves. They're more than just servants. They're complex beings with their own ancient magic and a deeply ingrained sense of loyalty.
And Rowling explores those themes through Dobby, who starts as a bumbling, a seemingly insignificant creature, but becomes a symbol of selflessness and sacrifice.
His arc is just heartbreaking. And then you have the centaurs, who are wise, proud, and deeply connected to the natural world. Their scenes always have this air of mystery and prophecy.
They often act as guides or messengers, offering cryptic warnings and glimpses into the future.
And who could forget the thestrals, those winged horses that can only be seen by those who have witnessed death. They're such a powerful visual representation of loss and grief.
They're a reminder that the wizarding world, for all its magic and wonder, is also a world where death is a reality, and that willingness to engage with those darker themes adds a layer of depth and maturity to the series.
It's like Rowling is acknowledging that even in a world filled with magic, life can be messy and complicated, and those complexities are reflected in even the smallest details.
Speaking of details, did you ever notice how much attention Rowling pays to the wizarding currency? It's not just generic gold coins, it's galleons, sickles, and nuts, each with a specific value and description.
Oh, absolutely. I love those details. It's like she sat down and created a whole economic system right down to the exchange rate.
Yeah.
It's a detail that could easily be glossed over, but it adds this layer of authenticity to the wizarding world.
And she reinforces that authenticity through sensory descriptions. Remember when Harry first visits Gringotts and Sorcerer's Stone? Rowling describes the clinking of coins, the weight of the bags.
Yes. It's like you can feel those galleons in your own hand, and those little details, the ones that you could easily miss if you weren't paying attention, are what really bring the world to life.
It's like she's saying, don't just read about this world, experience it. Immerse yourself in every sight, sound, and sensation.
And speaking of experiencing the world, Rowling doesn't shy away from humor even in the face of danger and darkness. She manages to inject these little moments of levity that provide a much-needed break for the tension.
The Weasley twins are a prime example. Their pranks and jokes are a constant source of amusement and a reminder that even in the midst of war, there's still room for laughter and joy.
Their shop, Weasley's Wizard Wheezes, is pure genius. It's a testament to their creativity and their ability to find humor in even the most absurd situations.
It's like a little pocket of chaos and fun in a world that can often feel very serious and high stakes.
And those moments of levity make the characters feel more human, more relatable. It's like they're saying, hey, even in a world of magic, we're still just teenagers who like to have a good time.
And that balance of light and dark, of humor and seriousness, is what makes the series so appealing to a wide audience.
It's like life, right? Even when things are tough, there are still moments of joy and laughter, and those moments are just as important as the big dramatic ones.
Speaking of details that often go unnoticed, did you ever think about how much meaning Rowling packs into her characters' names?
Oh, absolutely. It's one of my favorite things about her writing. The names aren't just labels, they're clues to the characters' personalities and destinies.
Take Albus Dumbledore, for example. Albus means white, which is often associated with purity and goodness, while Dumbledore is an archaic word for bumblebee, possibly symbolizing his love of music.
And then you have Severus. Snape. Severus has connotations of sternness and severity, which perfectly describes his demeanor, while Snape evokes a sense of bitterness and resentment, hinting at his troubled past.
It's like she's giving us these little hints about who these characters are right from the start.
It's incredibly clever, and it makes you want to delve deeper into the etymology of each name to see what hidden meanings you can uncover.
It's like a treasure hunt for word nerds.
Now let's talk about the ghosts. They're not just spooky additions. They offer unique perspectives on life, death, and the history of the wizarding world.
They're a constant reminder that death is not the end, but a different kind of existence, and they often serve as guides or sources of information for the living.
Like nearly headless Nick the Gryffindor ghost, who's always there to offer Harry advice and support, and then you have the Bloody Baron the Slytherin ghost, who's much more menacing and broody.
They represent different facets of the afterlife, and their presence adds this layer of depth and complexity to the world.
It's like Rowling is exploring the idea that death isn't a singular event. It's a journey with many possible paths.
And even something as seemingly superficial as clothing plays a significant role in the wizarding world.
Oh, definitely. It's another way. Rowling distinguishes between groups and individuals. The Hogwarts robes, for example. Each house has its own distinct colors and crest, reflecting their values and identity.
And then you have the Death Eaters, who always wear those black robes and masks, a visual representation of their menace and secrecy.
It's a simple but effective way to create a visual shorthand for good versus evil.
And those visual details are just as important as the written ones in creating a fully immersive world.
It's like she's using every tool at her disposal to bring this world to life. Speaking of tools, we can't forget about the wands. They're more than just magical instruments. They're extensions of the wizard. Each one is unique as the person who wields it.
And there's that beautiful detail about the wand choosing the wizard, not the other way around it. Suggests a deeper connection, a sense of destiny.
Like Harry's first trip to Ollivander's. It's not just about finding a wand that works. It's about finding a wand that fits him, that complements his personality and his magic.
And Mr. Ollivander describes each wand with such reverence, talking about the type of wood, the core material, as if they're living beings with their own histories and personalities.
It's that attention to detail, that sense of wonder and reverence that makes those scenes so magical.
And the fact that Harry's wand shares a phoenix feather core with Voldemort's wand adds this layer of symbolism and foreshadowing to their connection.
It's like their destinies are intertwined from the very beginning, and that detail, that connection forged through a single feather, elevates their rivalry to something truly epic.
It's a reminder that even the smallest details can have profound consequences.
Speaking of profound consequences, we need to talk about the dark arts. They represent the corrupting influence of power and the dangers of using magic for evil purposes.
And Rowling doesn't shy away from exploring the darkness within the wizarding world. The unforgivable curses, for example, are a chilling reminder of the potential for cruelty and violence, even in a world filled with magic.
And the fact that they're unforgivable highlights the gravity of using magic for evil. It's not just a matter of breaking the rules, it's about violating a fundamental moral code.
And the way she describes the effects of those curses, particularly the Cruciatus curse, is incredibly disturbing. It's a stark reminder that magic, for all its wonder, can also be a weapon of immense suffering.
And that duality, that balance between light and dark, is what makes the wizarding world so compelling. It's not a utopia. It's a world where good and evil are constantly at odds, where choices have consequences and where even the most powerful magic can be corrupted.
And that complexity is reflected in every detail, from the characters' names to the descriptions of the darkest spells.
Speaking of details that reflect complexity, the Ministry of Magic is a fascinating example of how Rowling uses details to explore themes of power corruption and the struggle for control.
The way the Ministry initially refuses to believe Voldemort has returned, even in the face of overwhelming evidence, is a chilling reflection of their denial and their desire to maintain the status quo.
And that blindness allows Voldemort to gain a foothold, which has devastating consequences for the entire wizarding world.
It's a reminder that even in a world of magic, political maneuvering and power struggles can have dire consequences.
And those consequences are felt on a personal level, not just a political one.
Exactly. It's not just about abstract concepts, it's about how those concepts affect individual lives.
And those individual lives are often shaped by forces beyond their control. The prophecy about Harry and Voldemort, for example, raises questions about fate versus free will and the power of destiny.
It's a prophecy that's open to interpretation, which adds a layer of mystery and suspense. It doesn't explicitly name Harry, but it hints at his role in the conflict, creating a sense of inevitability.
It's like Harry's destiny is predetermined, but he still has the agency to choose how he'll face it.
And that tension between fate and free will is one of the things that makes the story so compelling.
And that struggle is amplified by the influence of the media. The Daily Prophet, for example, often reflects the prevailing attitudes and biases of the wizarding community, highlighting the power of propaganda and the importance of critical thinking.
The way the Daily Prophet initially dismisses Harry's claims about Voldemort's return, labeling him a liar and attention seeker, is a clear example of how media can be used to manipulate public opinion.
It's a reminder that we should always question what we read and hear, especially from sources that have a vested interest in a particular narrative.
It's a theme that's just as relevant in our world as it is in the wizarding world.
And it makes you wonder, how would we react if magic suddenly became a reality? Would we embrace it, fear, try to control it?
That's a fascinating question, isn't it? And it speaks to our enduring fascination with the unknown, with the possibility that there might be something more to the world than what we can see and touch.
And Rowling taps into that beautifully. She doesn't just create a world of magic. She creates a world that makes us question our own perceptions of reality.
Speaking of perceptions, even the transportation system in the wizarding world is a carefully crafted detail that adds to the immersion.
Oh, absolutely. From the Flu Network to the Night Bus to the Hogwarts Express, each mode of transport is unique and reflects the ingenuity and creativity of the wizarding world.
The Flu Network, for example, allows witches and wizards to travel instantly by throwing flu powder into a fireplace and calling out their destination. It's a concept that's both practical and whimsical.
And it's so visually striking. Imagine stepping into a fireplace and emerging in a completely different location. It's like something out of a dream.
And then there's the Night Bus, a triple-decker bus that appears out of thin air to rescue stranded witches and wizards. It's a fun and quirky concept that perfectly captures the chaotic energy of the wizarding world.
And, of course, we can't forget the Hogwarts Express, that scarlet steam engine that whisks students away to a world of magic and adventure.
It's a journey that's filled with anticipation and excitement, and it's a symbol of the transition from the ordinary world to the extraordinary.
It's like stepping through a portal into a realm of endless possibilities.
And those possibilities are further expanded by the existence of potions. They're a complex and fascinating aspect of magic with the potential to heal harm or even transform.
Those potions classes with Snape were always a highlight. The way Rowling describes the smells, the colors, the consistency of the potions is so vivid, it's like you're right there in the dungeon with Harry trying not to mess up your draft of Living Death.
And the variety of potions is astounding. From the luck-enhancing Felix Felicis to the transformative Polyjuice potion.
It's like potions represent the boundless potential of magic, both for good and for evil.
And that duality makes them even more intriguing. They're not just magical concoctions, they're tools that can be used for a multitude of purposes depending on the intentions of the brewer.
And speaking of intentions, the concept of Horcruxes is one of the most chilling and ingenious details in the entire series. They represent Voldemort's desperate attempt to conquer death by splitting his soul and hiding the fragments in various objects.
It's a concept that speaks to his ambition, his fear of death, and his willingness to go to any lengths to achieve immortality.
And the way Rowling reveals the Horcruxes one by one throughout the series creates this sense of mystery and suspense. It's like a giant scavenger hunt with clues hidden in memories, objects, and even places.
And each Horcrux is unique, reflecting a different aspect of Voldemort's past and his twisted psyche.
It's like to understand the villain, you have to understand the pieces of his soul that he's scattered throughout the world.
And that pursuit of understanding is a theme that runs throughout the entire series.
It's like Rowling is saying, to defeat evil, you must first understand it. And that understanding requires a willingness to look beyond the surface and delve into the darkest corners of the human heart.
And ultimately, it's the human heart, the capacity for love and compassion that triumphs over darkness in the Harry Potter series.
That's so true. It's not just about defeating Voldemort. It's about the power of love to overcome even the most profound evil. Remember the protection Harry received from his mother's sacrifice.
It's a love that defies death, that transcends the boundaries of the physical world.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that love is the most powerful magic of all.
And it's not just romantic love.
Right.
It's the love between friends, the loyalty between siblings, the unwavering belief in the goodness of others. Those are the forces that ultimately drive Harry and his allies forward, even when things seem hopeless.
It's those moments of connection, those acts of selflessness and courage that make the series so emotionally resonant.
So it's not just about the magic and the adventure.
Right.
It's about the human element. It's about those universal themes that connect us all, regardless of whether we believe in magic or not.
And it's those themes woven through every detail of the wizarding world that make it feel so real, so relatable, and so enduring.
Yeah.
It's a world that continues to capture our imaginations, even years after the final book was published.
It's a testament to the power of storytelling, to the ability of a single author to create a world that feels so fully realized, so richly detailed, that it transcends the boundaries of fiction and becomes a part of our collective consciousness.
It's a world that we can revisit again and again, finding new insights and new perspectives with each reading. It's a world that continues to grow and evolve even within the confines of the 7 published books.
And that's the magic of J.K. Rowling's creation.
Right.
She's given us a world that we can explore and interpret on our own terms, a world that sparks our imaginations and makes us believe, even if just for a moment, that anything is possible.
So the next time you find yourself lost in the pages of Harry Potter, I encourage you to pay attention to those details. Those seemingly insignificant moments that breathe life into this extraordinary world.
Okay.
Because it's in those details, in those small acts of creative magic, that the true wonder lies.
And that's the takeaway from this deep dive.
Yeah.
The immersive nature of the wizarding world isn't just about grand magical events.
Yeah.
It's about the accumulation of those carefully chosen details. The sights, the sounds, the smells, the emotions that make it feel so real, so believable, so utterly captivating.
It's a reminder that even in a world of magic, it's the little things that make the biggest difference.
Welcome back, listeners. We're diving deep today into a world that's, well, magical, but, surprisingly familiar too, I think, the world of Harry Potter. We're going to be looking at those intriguing parallels between the wizarding world and our own world.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah.
How J.K. Rowling, she's writing these books, these magical, whimsical stories, but she's actually tackling these really complex social issues that we see reflected in our own world.
Right.
It's like,
She's holding up a mirror.
Yeah, exactly.
With magic.
Exactly.
Sure.
Using magic as this lens, this unique lens for social commentary.
Exactly. And to unpack those parallels, we're going to be looking at your sources, of course, the entire Harry Potter series.
Of course, yeah.
From Sorcerer's Stone all the way to Deathly Hallows.
Yeah.
And we're really going to go beyond the surface level.
Yeah.
Battles of good versus evil, and really delve into the kind of intricate fabric of wizarding society.
Yeah. Think about it, right? The Ministry of Magic, with all of its laws and regulations, it's eerily similar, isn't it?
Right.
To real world governments.
It is.
And what about the Daily Prophet?
Right.
It's the primary source of news, right, for witches and wizards. But
and is it always reliable?
Is it always reliable? Right.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Exactly.
Yeah, the Daily Prophet often feels like a mouthpiece for the ministry, doesn't it? Kind of pushing specific agendas, and sometimes even resorting to just outright propaganda.
Yeah. And remember specifically,
Yeah.
in Order of the Phoenix,
Yeah.
when the Ministry was really, desperately trying to discredit Harry and
Yeah.
Dumbledore, of course,
Yes.
the Prophet almost became like this tool,
Yes.
for
Yeah.
spreading misinformation. They painted Harry as this unstable attention seeker,
Right.
and Dumbledore as this senile old man.
Right. It's chilling how they manipulated public perception, isn't it? And it really echoes those real-world instances of, governments and powerful figures using the media to control the narrative.
Yeah.
It makes you question, how much of what we read and consume, even in our own world, is truly objective.
Yeah, and it's interesting, right? Because Rowling really uses this, I think, cleverly.
Yeah.
Right, the Prophet, to really expose these dangers
Yeah.
of media manipulation
Right.
and the impact that it can have on shaping public opinion, right? I mean,
Mhm.
it's a cautionary tale, really, for all of us, reminding us to be these critical consumers of information.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, the ministry itself, right? I mean,
Yeah.
exhibits some worrying tendencies, I think,
Yeah.
particularly when it comes to control and surveillance. I mean, they monitor underage magic, with those trace charms, which on the surface, I guess it seems like a reasonable measure to protect Muggles.
Sure.
But it's also, when you think about it,
Pretty invasive.
quite invasive.
Yeah.
I-
It's a double-edged sword, isn't it? I mean, the trace charms really highlight how
right.
technology, or in this case, magic, can be used for good and bad.
Right.
I mean, for protection and for control as well.
Yes, and it goes beyond the underage magic, I mean. In Order of the Phoenix, they're practically spying
Yeah.
on Harry and Dumbledore,
Yeah.
using, various methods to track their every move.
It's almost Orwellian, isn't it?
It is, like Big Brother's always watching.
Yes.
It raises, those questions about the balance between security and personal freedom.
Yeah.
And that's, a dilemma we often face in the real world as well.
Exactly. And the Ministry, despite its seemingly benevolent facade, often kind of blurs the lines a bit between protecting the wizarding world and just maintaining their own power. They can be so quick to silence dissent or anyone who challenges their authority. Just like, we see in some real world governments that lean towards authoritarianism.
Right. And then there's that whole blood purity prejudice, which is a deeply unsettling aspect of wizarding society. It's a clear reflection, isn't it, of real world-class and caste systems with pure blood wizards at the top, followed by half-bloods, and then Muggle-borns at the bottom.
This hierarchy is so deeply entrenched, I mean, it permeates every aspect of their lives.
Right.
From social interactions to career opportunities. And it's just this stark reminder of how, societal structures can really perpetuate inequality, even in a world, right, with magic.
Yeah, and Voldemort's obsession with blood purity.
Oh, yeah.
His horrific persecution of Muggle-borns is a disturbing echo of historical atrocities like racial and ethnic discrimination. It makes you wonder, why prejudice persists.
Yeah.
Even in a world with magic and wonder.
It's a reflection of human nature, isn't it? I mean, at the end of the day,
Right.
prejudice, it often stems from fear, ignorance, and a desire to, maintain power and control. And it's this really dark side of humanity that Rowling explores, with this unflinching honesty, even within a fantasy setting.
And it's those parallels,
Yeah.
those echoes
Yeah.
of real-world societal structures
Yeah.
that make the wizarding world, I think, so much more relatable.
Yeah.
It's not just a fantastical escape. It's really a commentary
It is.
on the complexities of our own world.
Exactly. And by weaving these familiar issues, right, into this magical narrative, she makes them, I think, more accessible, more thought-provoking. She encourages us to examine our own biases, the systems we live in, and the choices that we make, right? Both as individuals and as a society.
Absolutely.
And it's not just the overt parallels, right? Like, the Ministry mimicking these authoritarian regimes. I mean, there are much more subtle reflections, I think, that are woven into, the wizarding world, particularly when we consider how those empower, maintain that control.
Right. You're right. There's a lot going on beneath the surface. What specifically stands out to you?
Well, let's go back to Cornelius Fudge, okay? Remember, in the earlier books, he was so fixated on maintaining his image and downplaying that threat of Voldemort's return.
Oh, absolutely. And it was so frustrating how he just clung to this belief that Voldemort was gone, even when the evidence was staring him in the face.
Yeah, and Fudge really embodies this real phenomenon, right? That we see in positions of authority, both in our world and in the wizarding world, right? It's this tendency to prioritize self-preservation and control, even at the expense of truth and justice. They'd rather just maintain the status quo, however flawed it may be, than actually face these uncomfortable realities.
Right. It's like they're blinded by their own power and the fear of losing it.
Exactly.
And they become so entrenched in their own narratives that they lose sight of the bigger picture.
Exactly, exactly. And this fear of change, this resistance to acknowledging, these uncomfortable truths, it can have these really far-reaching consequences, right? I mean, just look at how Fudge's denial ultimately allowed Voldemort to gain strength and just plunge the wizarding world into chaos.
Yeah, it's a cautionary tale
Yeah.
about the dangers of clinging to power
Mm.
at all costs. Do you think are there other instances where the ministry's actions mirrored real-world power dynamic?
Absolutely. I mean, think about the way that they use the Daily Prophet, right, as this tool for propaganda.
Right.
Remember how they tried to discredit Harry,
Oh, yeah.
portraying him as this, attention-seeking liar who fabricated stories about
Yeah.
Voldemort's return?
For sure. It was a blatant attempt to just manipulate public opinion
Yeah.
and silence anyone who dared to challenge their version of events.
And this is such a familiar tactic, sadly, isn't it? I mean,
Yep.
authoritarian regimes throughout history have sought to control the media, spread this misinformation, right? Right.
To consolidate their power and to suppress dissent.
And it's scary how effective propaganda can be.
Yeah.
Especially when people are already, feeling anxious or vulnerable.
Yeah.
It preys on existing biases and fears,
Exactly.
making it easier to sway public opinion.
And Rowling, I think she brilliantly exposes this manipulation through the prophet.
Okay.
She shows how easily information can be distorted and used as a weapon, even in this, seemingly magical world.
It really makes you think about the sources that we rely on for information.
Yeah.
And how important it is to cultivate that critical eye. Do you think there are other aspects of wizarding society that reflect this kind of struggle for power and control?
Well, let's consider for a second, the division between purebloods and half-bloods and Muggleborns, right?
Right.
I mean, it's not simply prejudice, right? It's a system that's designed to maintain power and privilege for a select few. That's a really insightful point. It's not just about individual biases. It's about this, systemically ingrained hierarchy that benefits those at the top
Yeah.
while suppressing those at the bottom.
I mean, just think about how this hierarchy plays out, in the Ministry of Magic itself.
Right.
We see a clear bias against Muggleborns, right? Even within the supposed governing body that should represent all witches and wizards.
Right, that's so true. And
Yep.
and look at Dolores Umbridge and her reign of terror at Hogwarts, her discriminatory policies, her attempts to just discredit and silence anyone who challenged her authority. It was just this clear abuse of power rooted in prejudice.
And Umbridge is just a chilling example
Yeah.
of how prejudice can be just embedded within institutions,
Right.
making it even harder to dismantle, right?
Right.
Because it becomes normalized, it becomes almost invisible, and people just accept it as the way things are supposed to be.
And that's what makes it so insidious, isn't it? It's not always overt hatred. It can manifest as these subtle biases
Right.
and systemic inequalities
Exactly.
that just perpetuate the status quo.
Exactly. And Rowling, masterfully illustrates this through Umbridge's character. She's not a cackling villain like Voldemort.
Right.
She's this seemingly respectable authority figure
Right.
who uses her position to enforce these discriminatory practices.
Right.
And it's a far more, I think, realistic and unsettling depiction of how prejudice actually operates in society.
It's fascinating, isn't it, how Rowling uses these, seemingly fantastical elements to highlight really real and often uncomfortable truths about, our own world.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder, right, if the wizarding world, despite its magic and wonder, is ultimately utopian or dystopian.
That's a great question. I mean, it's a question, right, that has sparked countless debates among fans. On the surface, I mean, it is a world, right, brimming with wonder and possibility. Yet beneath the enchantment, there are these deep-seated issues that mirror our own struggles.
Right. It's like she's saying, even with magic, we can't escape the complexities of human nature and the challenges of building a just and equitable society. But amidst all this darkness, right? I mean, there's also this powerful theme of resistance and hope.
Absolutely. And that's where I think the concept of community becomes so, so crucial.
Right.
Think about how everyone bands together,
Right.
right, to fight Voldemort and his Death Eaters.
Right.
It's not just Harry. It's a collective effort. It's this network of individuals from Dumbledore's army to the Order of the Phoenix,
Right.
all united against this common threat.
It's inspiring how they kind of put aside their differences, their fears, even their personal ambitions, to work together for this greater cause.
Yeah.
It reminds me of those moments in history when people have just risen up against oppression, demanding change, fighting for a better world.
Yeah, and I think Rowling really emphasizes, that we can't overcome these systemic issues alone. It takes collective action, this willingness to stand up, right, for what's right, even when it's difficult or dangerous. And this sense of community extends beyond just, battling dark wizards.
Right.
It's evident in the smaller everyday acts of kindness and support that we see throughout the series.
Right, like how the Hogwarts students, even across house rivalries, come together to support each other during times of crisis.
Yeah.
It shows that, even in this world, full of magic and wonder, human connection and empathy are so essential.
Exactly. These acts of solidarity, both big and small, highlight, I think, the power of community in fostering resilience and hope. They remind us that even in the face of adversity, we can find strength in each other and work together to create a more just and compassionate world.
So what does all this mean for us? Living in this non-magical world, what can we take away from these, reflections of societal structures within the Harry Potter universe?
I think Rowling's message is ultimately one of empowerment, right? She encourages us to look at our own society with this critical eye, to recognize the ways in which power structures and social inequalities impact, our lives and the lives of those around us, and to not be afraid, right? To challenge those structures when they're unjust.
It's a call to action.
It is,
isn't it? To not just be, passive observers, but active participants in shaping a better world.
Exactly, and to remember that even small acts, right, of kindness, of courage, of resistance can have this ripple effect, inspiring others to do the same. Just like, Harry and his friends. We all have the power to make a difference.
I love how Rowling embeds these powerful messages, within this captivating story filled with magic and adventure. It's a reminder that even in the darkest of times, hope and resilience can prevail.
It's been a truly insightful deep dive.
It has.
Exploring these parallels between the wizarding world and our own really, I think, revealed the depth and complexity of Rowling's social commentary.
I absolutely agree. It's made me appreciate the series on a whole new level.
Yep.
And to our listeners, we encourage you to keep exploring these parallels, these reflections between the magical and the real. You might be surprised at what you discover. Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. Today, we're going to be tackling a really interesting question, and that is, could wizards and muggles actually coexist peacefully?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah, and I think we all kind of wonder about that as we're reading the books. And you've sent some really great material about the International Statute of Secrecy.
Yeah.
And we're going to kind of use that to jump off and explore how that impacts this whole coexistence question.
Sure.
So what do you think? I mean, are wizards and muggles just too different to ever really get along?
I think that's a fascinating question. And I think that, you have to remember that the statute of secrecy isn't just about, like, keeping magic under wraps or something like that.
Right.
It's really about maintaining a separation between two worlds that have fundamentally different ways of living.
Okay.
Like trying to blend oil and water,
Okay, so oil and water, got it. But why is that separation so important?
Yeah.
Couldn't a little magic be fun for everyone?
Well, I mean, think about like Harry's Uncle Vernon nearly having a stroke at the mere mention of a broomstick.
Right.
I mean, that kind of reaction shows just this deep fear and incomprehension that can exist on the Muggle side.
Yeah.
And on the flip side, think about the wizards and how they're constantly having to disguise their magic. They do elaborate memory charms. They're hiding everyday spells. I mean, it's got to be exhausting.
Yeah, it makes you wonder, is all that effort even worth it? I mean, is the statute of secrecy ultimately doing more harm than good?
I think that that's the million-dollar question,
Yeah.
It may prevent immediate chaos, but it also breeds suspicion, and it really prevents any real understanding between the two sides.
So the statute creates this us versus them mentality.
Exactly.
It doesn't really sound like a recipe for harmony.
No, not really.
I mean, haven't there been times, though, where wizards and muggles have interacted peacefully?
Well, yeah, there have been moments of cultural crossover, these glimmers of hope.
Mm-hmm.
Think about Arthur Weasley's fascination with Muggle inventions. It's almost childlike, and it shows a genuine curiosity about the other side.
Yeah.
And that kind of curiosity, I think, is essential for building any kind of bridge.
Arthur's fascination is endearing,
It is.
but it also makes me think about, those real-world explorers who stumbled upon new cultures.
Right?
And sometimes that curiosity led to understanding and respect, and sometimes not so much. Does that parallel worry you at all?
Absolutely. It really highlights the potential pitfalls of cultural exchange.
Yeah.
Just because some wizards adopt Muggle ways doesn't mean it's always done with respect or sensitivity.
Right.
Take the Malfoys, for instance. They view any adoption of Muggle culture as, like, lowering themselves.
Yep.
That kind of prejudice is a huge obstacle to any kind of real integration.
Right, so we've got fear and prejudice on both sides.
Yeah.
Not exactly a recipe for a happy ending.
Not really.
But haven't there been cases where wizards have used their magic to help muggles?
Oh, sure.
Like, wouldn't that count as a positive interaction?
It's tricky because the wizarding world often takes a paternalistic approach,
Okay.
making decisions for Muggles without actually consulting them.
Like what?
Well, remember when the Ministry modified the weather to cover up the Quidditch World Cup?
Oh, right.
I mean, they just decided what was best for Muggles without even asking.
Okay, so good intentions aren't enough.
Right.
You need actual communication and collaboration.
Exactly.
And that seems to be sorely lacking.
Yeah.
But how could that even work?
Yeah.
Their governments are completely separate.
Exactly. The lack of formal relationships between wizarding and Muggle governments is a major roadblock.
Yeah.
They operate in entirely different spheres with no established channels for communication or cooperation.
Right.
That's a recipe for disaster, especially when you consider the issues that impact both worlds.
So we've got this statute enforcing separation.
Right.
We've got these deep-seated prejudices.
Yeah.
And zero official communication between their governments. It's starting to feel like those coexist bumper stickers, you see.
Oh, yeah.
The ones with all the different religious symbols?
Yeah.
Like a nice idea, but totally unrealistic.
Well, don't despair just yet.
Okay.
We've only just scratched the surface. Let's delve a bit deeper into these cultural crossovers.
Okay.
These glimmers of hope. Maybe those can point us in a more optimistic direction.
All right. I like it.
Yeah.
Let's be optimistic.
Yeah. Yeah. Those coexist bumper stickers, they really do make you think, don't they?
Yeah.
Nice sentiment. But can it actually work in practice?
Yeah.
So let's look at some of those cultural exchanges that we were talking about.
Okay.
Maybe those offer some clues. We see young witches and wizards listening to Muggle music, adopting their fashions, even using Muggle transportation.
Yeah. It's like that scene in Goblet of Fire where the Weasley twins are trying to trade their fake wands for badges with the band's logo.
Mm.
You can almost feel their excitement for this Muggle music festival.
Right.
It definitely suggests a willingness to engage with the Muggle world.
Exactly. And that willingness to engage, I think, is a crucial starting point.
Okay.
It's a step away from that us versus them mentality.
Yeah.
And towards a more nuanced understanding of each other's cultures.
But it's not just about music and fashion, right?
No.
I mean, wizards rely on Muggle technology all the time.
Yeah.
They use Muggle money, their transportation systems, even things like electricity and plumbing.
Precisely, this reliance on Muggle infrastructure,
Yeah.
I think, highlights a potential area of collaboration.
Okay.
Imagine the possibilities if wizards and Muggles could work together to improve these systems,
Right.
to make them more efficient, more sustainable,
Uh-huh.
more magical even.
Hold on. Are we talking about a world where wizards are helping design self-driving cars or creating renewable energy sources?
Why not?
I mean, that sounds like something straight out of a sci-fi movie.
Yeah, but think about it.
Yeah.
Combining Muggle engineering with magical innovation,
Uh-huh.
the possibilities are truly mind-boggling. I mean, we could see advancements in medicine technology,
Right. Yeah.
even environmental sustainability that would benefit both worlds.
Okay. I'm starting to see the potential here.
Good.
But let's be realistic. Even if we have these cultural crossovers
Right.
and these opportunities for collaboration,
Sure.
we still have that huge obstacle of the statute of secrecy.
Yeah.
I mean, how can you have real integration when one side is constantly hiding from the other?
That is the crux of the issue.
Right.
The statute creates this inherent power imbalance.
Yeah.
The wizarding world gets to choose when and how they interact with Muggles,
Right.
while Muggles are left in the dark, often manipulated and controlled without their knowledge or consent.
It's like a one-way mirror.
Yeah.
Wizards can observe and interact with Muggle society,
Right.
but Muggles are completely shut out from the wizarding world.
Right.
That doesn't seem very fair, does it?
It certainly raises some ethical questions.
Yeah.
And it creates a situation where distrust and suspicion are practically baked into the system. That's hardly a recipe for harmonious coexistence.
So even if individual wizards are open to integration,
Yeah.
the system itself seems designed to prevent it.
Right.
It's like they're trying to have their cauldron and eat it too,
Yeah. Yeah.
enjoying the benefits of the Muggle world while keeping their own world completely separate.
That's a very astute observation.
Right?
And it highlights, I think, a fundamental question.
Okay.
Do wizards even want to integrate with Muggles?
Right.
Or are they content with the status quo,
Yeah.
the separation that allows them to maintain their power and secrecy?
It makes you wonder if they're even capable of seeing Muggles as equals.
Yeah.
I mean, we've talked about the Malfoys and their prejudice,
Right.
but isn't there a sense of superiority that permeates the entire wizarding world?
I think there's definitely an element of elitism there.
Yeah.
Remember those history lessons at Hogwarts?
Right.
They focus almost entirely on wizarding achievements,
Yeah.
with barely a mention of Muggle contributions to history.
Right.
It's as if they believe they exist on a higher plane, separate from the messy, mundane world of Muggles.
Okay, so we've got this entrenched elitism.
Yeah.
A system designed to enforce separation.
Right.
And a whole lot of distrust on both sides.
Sure.
It's starting to feel like the chances of true coexistence are about as slim as finding a unicorn in a Muggle zoo.
Right.
Are we just setting ourselves up for disappointment here?
Not necessarily. We're talking about a fictional world.
Right.
A world where anything is possible.
True.
And even within that world, we see these glimpses of a different path.
Okay.
A path where wizards and Muggles could learn to respect and even value their differences.
Those glimpses are what keep the hope alive, right?
I think so.
But how do we turn those glimpses into something more tangible?
Right.
Something that could actually bridge this vast divide.
That's the challenge, isn't it?
It is.
To move beyond these individual acts of kindness or curiosity and create a framework that fosters genuine cooperation and understanding.
Yeah.
Perhaps it's time to think bigger.
Okay.
To imagine structures that could bring these two worlds together in a meaningful way.
Thinking bigger. Yeah. That sounds kind of daunting. Where do you even begin to build a bridge between two worlds that are so fundamentally different? It's like trying to get a house elf and a robot to do the dishes together.
Well, maybe we can borrow a page from our own world, Think about international organizations like the United Nations.
Okay.
They bring together diverse countries with these conflicting interests, and they provide a platform for dialogue, diplomacy, and cooperation.
So you're suggesting a sort of magical United Nations.
Why not?
A council with representatives from both the Ministry of Magic and various Muggle governments.
Exactly.
I can already see the headlines. Wizards at the UN. No, seriously.
It may sound far-fetched.
It does.
But isn't that the kind of radical shift in thinking we need?
Maybe.
Imagine a forum where wizards and Muggles could address issues that impact both worlds.
Like,
Think about climate change international trade, even the potential for magical diseases to spread to the Muggle world.
okay, I'll admit, a magical UN does have a certain appeal,
Yeah.
but wouldn't that require a massive reveal?
Wow.
Imagine the media frenzy, the social and political upheaval. I mean, wouldn't that kind of exposure risk throwing the entire world into chaos?
There's no denying the potential for disruption, but consider the alternative.
Right.
Continued secrecy, mistrust, and ultimately conflict. Perhaps a gradual, controlled exposure is the only way to build the kind of trust and understanding that's necessary for true coexistence.
So baby steps,
Exactly.
maybe starting with small-scale collaborations on specific issues,
Right.
building up to more open dialogue over time. It's
Yeah.
like dipping your toes into the pool before taking the plunge.
Exactly. Start with manageable projects, demonstrate the benefits of cooperation, and gradually build confidence on both sides.
Okay.
Maybe begin with something like a joint task force to address magical creatures that stray into Muggle territory.
Right. Instead of Obliviator swooping in and wiping memories,
Mhm.
you could have a team of wizards and Muggle wildlife experts
Yeah.
working together to relocate the creature safely and humanely.
Right.
That would send a powerful message about cooperation and respect.
Precisely. And from there, you could expand into other areas.
Got it.
Joint research initiatives, cultural exchange programs, maybe even a limited sharing of magical knowledge and technology. It's about laying the groundwork for a future where wizards and muggles can see each other not as threats, but as partners.
Okay, this is starting to feel like a real possibility.
Good.
But what about the hardliners on both sides?
Uh-huh.
The pureblood supremacists who see Muggles as inferior, and the Muggles who would fear and reject anything that challenges their worldview.
Those are definitely the toughest challenges. You can't force people to change their beliefs overnight,
Right.
but you can create opportunities for exposure, education, and empathy.
Okay.
Imagine young wizards and witches spending time in Muggle schools, learning about their history, their culture, their values.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
Kind of like a magical exchange student program.
Exactly.
You could help break down stereotypes and foster those person-to-person connections that transcend prejudice.
Right.
And maybe some open-minded Muggles could be invited to experience the wonder of the wizarding world.
Yeah,
Under carefully controlled conditions, of course.
of course.
Right?
Imagine a Muggle scientist witnessing a healing spell or an engineer observing the construction of Hogwarts. That kind of firsthand experience could be transformative,
Right.
challenging their assumptions and opening them up to new possibilities.
This is all so exciting.
Yeah.
I'm starting to envision a world where wizards and Muggles can share their knowledge, their skills, their cultures, and create something truly amazing together.
Wouldn't that be great?
It would, but it all hinges on that willingness to step outside your comfort zone, to embrace the unknown, and to trust that the other side isn't out to get you.
That's the heart of it, isn't it?
Yeah.
Trust, understanding, and a willingness to see the world through someone else's eyes.
Right.
It's a tall order. But if we can imagine it in the wizarding world,
Yeah.
perhaps we can start to imagine it in our own world as well.
So maybe this isn't just a deep dive into the world of Harry Potter. Maybe it's a reflection on our own world,
Yeah.
our own capacity for bridging divides and building a more harmonious future.
Perhaps the real magic lies not in wands and spells, but in our ability to connect with each other, despite our differences.
That's something worth pondering, isn't it? Thanks for joining us on this journey through the possibilities of wizarding and Muggle coexistence. Until next time, keep those wands at the ready and those minds open to the magic of understanding.